further ado, I shall record our conversation. It is my great privilege and my great joy to welcome a friend. Among many other things, Petre Guran is a researcher at the Romanian Academy. He has studied for many decades, should I say, political theology, both in the modern context of totalitarianism in Russia on the one hand and in Germany on the other hand, but also he has studied political theology, beginning with the early Christian church and ending, I think, I'm not mistaken here, with the 14th century Byzantium at the end of the 15th century and the end of the 15th century, excuse me. So then he has also paid some attention to the foundational texts of Gregory Palamas when it comes to Christian eschatology. And tonight, Mr. Guran, Petre Guran, our friend, will give a lecture which will somehow be introduced by a discussion of his last book, which is an amazing, a very impressive document written in French. And this is no surprise because he has graduated from Sorbonne, Rendre la couronne au Christ, Etudes sur la fin de l'idée impériale byzantine. This has been recently published in, I think, Romania, but also this book is, I think, distributed in Germany, Heidelberg, and elsewhere in Europe. And the book, Rendre la couronne au Christ, translates giving the crown to Christ. A study about the end of the imperial Byzantine idea. This is a very substantial research on Christian eschatology, which is the doctrine about the end of times, which we can find in the New Testament, but also in some intertestamental texts, such as the book of Daniel. Tonight, we shall ask some fundamental questions which are related to our way of understanding the relationship between time and eternity on the one hand, a fundamental question regarding the relationship between the scriptural document, that is the Bible, the biblical revelation on the one hand, and the historical unfolding of events which might resemble some events that are being documented in the book of Revelation or in other such historical and theological books. Mr. Guran has been a very important voice among those who have defended the rights of Christians to have a free voice in the post-communist Romanian world. He has, as I said before, paid a lot of attention to the Byzantine history and in particular to the cataclysmic year of 1453, which has challenged the eschatological beliefs of the Eastern Roman citizens by the end of the 14th and by early 15th century. There was a gradual decline in the Byzantine Empire, which was both social, economic, and political, which begged the question related to the presence of God in the very existence of the Christian Commonwealth, which was the Byzantium, at that time. Tonight, we shall ask questions pertaining to the field of theology and culture, and also we shall ask questions which are contemporary, very much contemporary questions, because we all today in the 21st century are asking ourselves, if we are true believers, may I say so, we are asking ourselves the same questions which both the Byzantine citizens and, that is, the Eastern Roman citizens and the early Christians have asked themselves. So without further ado, Petre, you are very welcome in our community, and I'm more than eager to ask you to begin with about the genesis of this wonderful PhD and then wonderful book, Rendre la couronne au Christ. Perhaps you may begin by telling us why you, as a student of political science in Bucharest, as a student of history in Paris, you have decided to look at Byzantium first and at the end of the Byzantine Empire second.
Yes, thank you very much, Mihai, for your kind introduction. So yes, maybe I will put also on a share screen this image at some point. But I want just to say a few questions on the general theme. So, as you announced, it is this cataclysmic event, 1453. Anyway, called like that. I realized in the last years I was put to do this exercise to teach history for non-historians, for people who are not of my field of research. And then you realize that our discipline, history, goes through a thorough epistemological crisis. What is history is the big question finally that my listeners ask me, because as I was told by my teachers in the last, and as I in a way did myself in the last 50, 70 years, I would call, since the Second World War, progressively deconstructing history. So looking what is behind the text, behind the narratives, what was not told, or if there is a possible other history than the one that was told by historians of previous generations. And when you start deconstructing, at the end, you have nothing to tell anymore. There is no history at the end, and people need history. Now I'm making this short introduction to understand, as you said, the context, if not the genesis, but the intellectual context of this book, which is a book, in fact, I should put it here. One moment, I didn't think, but that the image is worth seeing closer.
Do you have the right to share, to do the share screen? May I give you?
Yes, I think I have the right to share screen. Share screen, multiple participants. Share screen, and where is it? Here. So this is, no, wait a second, I will find a.
This is the book cover.
The book cover, yes, the book cover. To show you this image, it will be very useful for people to comment then on this image. No, not this one.
Perhaps you can give us at the end a link, yes, where people can buy the book, but this is a secondary question.
Yes, this is a secondary question. Yes, I wanted just to have, excuse me for being so.
Don't worry.
Yes, this is, it comes now, it will appear. So, stop sharing, share again. No, to have a good now you see it better.
Yes.
So So coming back, the epoch when I was writing this book, this is almost 20 years ago, was an epoch when the discussions about what is Byzantium were just starting. We are now very, very advanced in this discussion. So many historians even ask whether we should still speak about Byzantium as a name for this reality we are describing. Because as maybe some of you know, the official title, if we can say so, so the title, the name their inhabitants was giving to this empire was the Roman Empire. So exactly. they never called themselves Byzantium. And this is very important to know. Why? Because it is this name Byzantium made us have a different perception on this reality, starting with the 17th century, late 16th and 17th century. Why was it so important to change the name of this reality? Because if you have called in Western historiography, basically, the Roman Empire, then of course the conquest of the Roman Empire would have meant something completely different than it was presented. In 14th and 15th century, so the contemporaries of the last Byzantines in Western Europe called them just Greeks. So this was the name, the Greeks. And the empire was the empire of the Greeks. Nevertheless, all these people who were writing in their documents the empire of the Greeks, I mean the Pope and the Western Emperor, they knew that the Byzantines themselves called Romans, and this explains in a way the interest Western Europe took in preserving Byzantium, defending Byzantium. Now here in Eastern Europe, in Greek historiography, in Romanian historiography, we are used to tell the story that the Westerners didn't help Byzantium. They didn't want to help it. They abandoned Byzantium to be conquered by the Turks. But in fact, throughout the late 14th century and early 15th century, Western powers systematically lost battles with the Ottoman Empire, with the sultans, Ottoman sultans. So in fact, they failed, they didn't succeed in defending Byzantium, because the main troops who were defending the city of Constantinople in May 1453 were mercenaries, Western mercenaries, not Byzantine soldiers. So
Giussani. Giussani.
Giustiniani, yes.
Giustiniani.
Giustiniani Longo, who was the captain of...
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, please continue.
Yes. So I was giving a little some facts to understand better the strange perception, apparently strange perception of Byzantinists, of specialists of Byzantine history, that 1453 is not the real end of Byzantium. And this discussion was starting in the 90s. So to reconsider Byzantium, and one of the great Byzantinists I met, not only I met, but I was directed, he instructed me in preparing this thesis, Gilbert Dagron, and I followed his seminaries at the Collège de France. He was already announcing that in a way the real end of Byzantium is 1204. So 250 years early. Now, coming back, so to understand what I was looking for, I was looking for an explanation why this empire, this state, this political structure, which we call late Byzantium, so the last 250 years, didn't succeed as a state. Why it failed as a state, and not only as a state, but also as a society. Because, and this is another paradox of history, although the conquest itself in 1453 wasn't followed by a slaughter of the population. Part of the population was sold, but as slaves, but soon bought back by Mehmed the Conqueror, because he wanted to bring Greeks back to Constantinople, to have the city inhabited. So, and other parts, many districts of Constantinople, in fact, were preserved, and so the population continued to live there. I am saying this because in modern Greek identity, there was always a discussion, always since the 19th century, when they started building their new political, modern nation political identity, was a discussion. Who are we, the Greeks? Are we the descendants of the Byzantines, the continuators of the Byzantine Empire, or a revival, renaissance of ancient Greece? And the ancient Greece layer prevailed in modern Greek identity. Now, coming back to my book. So the basic question I was asking, and this explains why a political scientist was needed to ask such questions, was what happened within the society. A still economically important society in the 14th century, with large states, with cities, so two cities, Constantinople and Thessaloniki at least, and an elite which is very important in the Middle Age, intellectual, commercial, aristocratic elite, which was very active still in the 13th and 14th century. So what happened with them, and why did their state fail? And this question also is linked to another question which belongs to, let's say, my Romanian identity, and the way history is seen, history of Byzantium was seen in Romanian historiography, at least since Iorga. Not at least, but I would say precisely since Iorga. And in Romania, the Romanian medieval principalities, but also modern Romania, was in a way portrayed as a successor, imitator, a product of Byzantium. And you know, I am here recalling several chapters, not the whole book, but one of the great ideas in Yorga's book, Byzance après Byzance, Byzantium after Byzantium, was this, that Byzantium survived and continued its life on the territory, partly on the territory of the Romanian principalities, until the revolution of 1821. So with Yorga, we have a second date for the fall of Byzantium, which is 1821. So the beginning of national revolutions, bourgeois revolutions in Eastern Europe. I will then explain that with this vision that we, the Romanians, in a way continued Byzantium. I was puzzled, and the interrogation came from this point of view. Nevertheless, in its actual civilization, the Romanian principalities resembled much less Byzantium than its Western Latin neighbors, particularly Hungary and Poland. And how come and when and under what form did we, so the medieval Romanians in this sense, did the medieval Romanians start thinking of themselves of being continuators of Byzantium? Of course, I was aware very soon by my readings already at the university that the same claim and the same phenomenon was known in the Russian society. And there, in a way, the paradox was even greater. Because in the Romanian principalities, you could say the Romanian principalities couldn't do better in the Middle Ages because they were conquered or almost conquered. They were under the control and then even closer control of the Ottoman Empire. So they couldn't act as an empire, one would say. No? So that's why a famous historian in Paris, Petre Guran, used the formula crypto empire, hidden empire. So the principalities were a hidden empire. But in the Russian case, there wasn't this explanation. Russia grew since the 15th century, became a success, generation after generation, a stronger state, and an important actor in European history. And nevertheless, their society didn't resemble and didn't copy finally Byzantium. So starting from this observation, I asked myself, and I asked my sources, the sources I was little by little establishing, what happened in the last centuries of Byzantium, in these centuries between 1204 and 1453, which would have made this transmission impossible of a Byzantine model. Where is the Byzantine model? Where is the prototype?
Petre, just to very quickly clarify this. So what you have said so far is that we should look at Constantinople and at the Byzantine civilization as if they always regarded themselves as Romans proper, not anything else. So yes, Constantinople was the first copy of the original Rome, the first copy of the original Rome. Then you have Bucharest, and then you have Moscow as secondary and tertiary attempts to copy Constantinople, but not so successful. Now, as we have in the historiography of the West, a conversation about the fall of the first Rome, 475, if I'm not mistaken, or 476, we have a conversation about the fall of the second Rome. And this is the subject you are approaching right now. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And it is, I should recall here that one of the names of Constantinople was precisely that of New Rome, Nea Romi, New Rome. This is a title which the city received already in the time of Constantine the Great. So the project of copying Rome on the shore of Bosphorus was Constantine's original idea. And he copied it so well that he brought all the institutions, all the Roman institutions, he brought to Constantinople. Not bringing and leaving nothing in Rome. In fact, they doubled them. So there was a Senate in Rome and a Senate in Constantinople. There was a hippodrome in Rome and there was a hippodrome in Constantinople. There was a sacred palace in Rome and a sacred palace in Constantinople. What is in a way new in Constantinople, and which makes it the capital of a new empire or of a different empire from that Constantine left in Western Europe, was the fact that to this ancient Roman institutions, he added a church, the church, with important buildings, which in Constantinople had from the beginning a place in the civic center of the city. So Saint Sophia, and then the Holy Apostles, and several other churches. So this is the new element which makes of Constantinople a kind of perfect model of Rome. The Rome where ancient Rome and the new Rome met. And by new Rome, I mean here Christianity. Coming now back to our story, you are very right to see a double movement from Italian Rome to the Rome on the Bosphorian shore. And then, this means this then is to be dated somewhere between 1204 and 1453. Other copies, this time of Constantinople, and before speaking of the Romanian copy and of the Muscovite copy, we can speak of the Bulgarian copy and then of the Serbian copy of Constantinople. Already in these last centuries of Byzantium, this process of copying Byzantium started. Now, in the Serbian and Bulgarian case, we have to say that the copy is a replacement for a failed project. So the project both of Assanid dynasty and then of the Serbian dynasty of Nemanjić, so the Nemanid dynasty, their intention was to conquer Constantinople, to become themselves the masters of Constantinople. And when they attempted this coup, this political project, they were already very Byzantinized. So they were almost Greek rulers by their education, by their mentality. But they failed. And so they just copied Constantinople in Serbia without a political center, and in Bulgaria with an important political center in Ternopil. Nevertheless, the copies which are attributed to the principalities, the Romanian principalities, and to Moscow are another type of copy. When this claim appeared, especially in the Romanian principalities, let's say with Neagoe Basarab, it was not so much a copy of imperial Byzantium as a support for ecclesiastical Byzantium. And here my book is very important. So very important. I think that the most interesting aspect in my book consists in showing how in these last centuries, two institutions split out of Byzantium, of the imperial Byzantium. So on the one side, the Byzantine state with still an emperor and in Nicaea in exile, then coming back in Constantinople, and another institution appeared, which was not an independent, which was not an institution per se in earlier centuries of Byzantium, which is the church. And the church, the Byzantine church, was a church within the empire. Starting with the 13th century, the what we call today the Orthodox Church starts being an international institution, which is across several states, Serbia, Bulgaria, different, because we have to recall this also. In the 13th century, we have different Byzantine states in Nicaea, so in Western Anatolia, then in Epirus, in Thessaly, and in Trebizonda on the Black Sea shore. So we have all these states who are competing, who are pretending to be the empire, who want to be the empire, and only one succeeds to represent the empire finally, which is Nicaea. So a Nicene general conquers Constantinople, and the emperor enters and reestablishes its power in Constantinople.
Petre, I'm sorry you asked me to somehow channel our conversation in the form of a dialogue. Please. And so I'm from time to time interrupting only in order to clarify. So now a theological, very serious theological question. Why do you think the Eastern Roman Christians thought that the empire was a privileged political form through which the providence, the divine providence, would somehow impart the world some special gifts? Why was the empire in and by itself so critical for the theological vision of the world and of God and the world relationship?
Yes, you are always pushing me back into history, so to explain things which happened before but of course it is the first chapter on my book speaks about these earlier centuries. The chapter which is called,
you see here Justinian.
Yes, Épiphanie impériale et grâce incréée, herméneutique du nombre. So I was studying how these Romans, this Christian Romans, starting with the fourth century, were seeing their emperor, and why among all the mortals they ascribe to the emperor a halo like to a saint. Yes, maybe we should show a few images. I will.
It is Ravenna, I think. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
This is Italy, 6th century Italy. You have Justinian and probably also Belisarius, I hope. He's my hero. So you have some people, and the only one who has a crown and also like a halo, a sacred halo, is the emperor.
Yes, I want to share another image. Do you see this one?
Yes.
Yes, this is the entrance door, the imperial entrance door. So the way by which the emperor entered Saint Sophia in Constantinople. And here you see the Virgin with Christ in her laps, and on his right side, the Emperor Justinian holding Saint Sophia, and on his left side is Saint Constantine offering the city to the Virgin. And it is written, Constantinos o en agiois megas Basileus. Yes, so Constantine, between the saints, the great emperor, and here Justinianos or Audemius of good memory, Basileus
Emperor.
So this views of emperorship as representing really a chosen function among earthly functions. So earthly representatives of God.
But what was the biblical basis for it? I mean, what in the world would make you believe that an earthly person with so many passions, like Justinian married a former prostitute, what would make you believe all this? And I'm playing the devil's advocate here. Because in the Bible, the kings are, especially in the Old Testament, are simply not in connection with God. They are always falling short of the mark. They are always falling into sin. So why would you see the king or the emperor as something special?
Let me show you and reflect on the other image you were observing, the one in Ravenna, where you have Justinian with a halo, the rest of the high officers and left and right, probably Narses and Belisarius, or Narses or Belisarius, and on his left side, the Bishop Maximianus, the Bishop of Ravenna. And you see the bishop doesn't have a halo. He is much less a representative of God than Justinian. Yes. So you are completely right to ask the question, what made them believe that the emperor was so important in Christianity? And my answer to this is the fact that in the 4th century, what happened was a blend of imperial tradition, of Romanship and belief in the eternity and centrality of Rome in world's history, and Christianity. Of course, they use what Roman and ideologists found interesting in, and I'm calling such an ideologist, of course, with humor and with sympathy, not very great, but still with sympathy, Eusebius of Caesarea. So the famous bishop of Caesarea, who wrote the life of Constantine and a book in praise and a discourse in praise of Constantine, and then also ecclesiastical history and a lot of other theological books. But what they saw, these ideologists, interesting in this opportunity was to equivalate emperorship, Roman emperorship, with sacred kingship, Jewish, so Hebrew sacred kingship. And this is a reference directly to David and the kings of Israel. And I will show you here something very interesting, that look look how they were in a manuscript of the 9th century, how Byzantine painters were representing David. David was dressed like a Byzantine emperor, with the same crown, with the same dressing, with the same position, the same central position. So yes, you were probably thinking I would give this answer. The Roman emperors were considered in a way and not so much a copy as the realization of a model which was given in the Ancient Testament. This is the the strangest element in Byzantine historical thought, the fact that they were looking at the Ancient Testament, at the history of the Jews, as annunciation, a prophecy about the Christian empire. So David was the model, but also the anticipation, the prophecy of a Byzantine emperor. And the Byzantine emperor had only to conform to the model given in the Old Testament to be a valid, a legitimate emperor.
But again, I'm stressing this, Petre, because you are also a very acute student of the New Testament. You've written wonderful essays. I always insist that you should also publish theological books, not just political and historical books. So you know very well that Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. The kingdom of God is within you." Why then many generations of Byzantine, that is Eastern Roman citizens and Christians, believed that they should trouble themselves with building an empire? Why would they still do that? If the kingdom of God is not from this world.
Yes, but at the moment, we have to return to this early 4th century, when the cult of the emperor was at its height, so the most developed. Imperial cult was not so developed in the time of Augustus, not to say of Caesar, as it was in this late 3rd, early 4th century. And the emperors used different strategies to put themselves in the center of Roman civil religion. So when they, and especially Constantine, decided to make peace with Christianity, the strategy, and this is very obvious from his architectural program, the architectural program of Constantine, his project was to become the God of the Christians by an assimilation with Christ. So the emperor is the visible Christ in a way. When he builds the holy apostles in Constantinople, he puts the tombs of the 12 apostles around in a circle around his own coffin, and he was in the center of the 12 apostles. Of course, this was unacceptable from a Christian point of view, this assimilation. So the whole strategy of Eusebius and then of other Christian thinkers was to give another explanation, so another variant to the emperor, which we find in expressions such as bishop of those who are outside, as vicar of Christ. That this is already stronger than we would like. Or anyway, the anointed one, so the emperor as anointed, although anointment was not used in the Roman Empire, in the late Roman Empire, and neither in anointment as a rite was invented in Western Europe. So there are several strategies, rhetorical, so in discourse, through words, to make the emperor look like almost, but not quite, a sacred figure, an icon, I would say, an icon of God. So this is probably the most correct expression of the first 4 or 5 centuries of Christianity in the Roman Empire, to see the emperor as an icon of God. The iconoclastic, the political aspect of the iconoclastic crisis is linked to the fact that the icons were dethroning the emperor from its role of icon of Christ. So if you have a real icon of Christ, you don't have to look at the emperor anymore as an icon of Christ. Do you understand my point, Mihai?
I do. I absolutely do. I absolutely do. And I want to bring you close to the end of your talk, because we want to take questions from our audience. And I want you to bring into the conversation this amazing theologian, Gregory Palamas. We have a Romanian edition of Gregory Palamas, many
by Father Ioan Jr. Yes,
exactly. And also, may I recommend you all, ladies and gentlemen, this amazing document which tells you how iconoclasm played a crucial role, as Mr. Guran said, in the 8th century, excuse me. So
yes, and in the forging of Orthodox consciousness.
So why is Gregory Palamas as a theologian so important for your book and for the end of Byzantium? And how could spiritual Byzantium survive after the collapse of political Byzantium?
Yes, let me put it very quickly and very simple. Christian thought throughout the centuries is a very patient and gradual deconstruction of the Roman ideology. So little by little, the empire was losing its sacred position and its definition, central definition in human history through Christian thought. And the final blow to this imperial idea, so this is the central of my thesis, the final blow to this imperial ideology was given by the hesychast theological thought in the 14th century. And Gregory Palamas is the main author who voices this new view of history in which, as you say, we do not need an earthly empire. We Christians, this time I'm identifying myself as a Christian when I'm saying we. We do not need an empire in order to live our faith. This is important to say, because Christianity was the ideological factor which constructed the Christian empire, the Eastern Empire. So people were fighting for Christ. They were fighting for the Mother of God when they were defending Constantinople or other provinces. So in the 14th century, this Christian man called Gregory Palamas, first a monk in the monastery of Vatopedi on Mount Athos, and then later Metropolitan of Thessaloniki, he came with such a theology which made the empire secondary to Christian identity. And I am saying in my book that this theology and the role of a group of monks we call hesychasts, and later the supporters of Palamas called Palamites, they played a role in diminishing the role of the empire and growing the role of the church, saying that the church, and this time the church represented by the Patriarch of Constantinople. And I am discussing here a phrase which is very important, a phrase written, an juridical idea, juridical political idea, written in the 9th century by Patriarch Photius, or Photius, Latin form. So Photius of Constantinople in the 9th century already had this idea, but his idea was erased from the textbooks by subsequent emperors, and particularly by Leo VI. And his idea was such: the Patriarch of Constantinople is a living icon of Christ. You see the exact parallelism with the earlier imperial idea. Not the emperor is icon of Christ, but the Patriarch of Constantinople is the living icon of Christ. And this idea was rediscovered and put forward and developed in the 14th century, making the Patriarch chief over an extended oikumene, which was much more greater than the empire at that time. Of course, in the 14th century, the empire is very small already. It's a small-scale state in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, the Patriarch of Constantinople controls bishops and monasteries and ecclesiastical entities and representatives of his power from northern Russia to Anatolia and the Eastern Mediterranean.
May I just interrupt you for a second, because we have people living in America right now watching you. We have members of the club from the United States. And what's shocking and striking to me, at least, is the fact that there is a street in New York called Patriarch Bartholomew Street, and there is a place where the Archbishop, the Patriarch of Constantinople lives. As a Patriarch of Constantinople, he lives in New York. So in a sense, you have a new development after Constantinople, the second Rome, after Bucharest, after Moscow, after Belgrade. Now you have Washington or New York becoming an interesting place where the imperial idea is still living on.
Yes, the precise moment when this idea of a patriarch over the whole world was born is when they dared, after 1204, to elect a patriarch in Nicaea, but not as Metropolitan of Nicaea, but with the title of Patriarch of Constantinople. And you know that the Patriarch of Constantinople has also the title of Ecumenical Patriarch. And in the title of Ecumenical Patriarch, he's called also Archbishop of New Rome. So he's Archbishop of New Rome and Ecumenical Patriarch. As such, he's not linked to a city, because in his function, he bears only the name of the city, wherever he is in this world. So he doesn't need to be in Constantinople in order to be Ecumenical Patriarch in Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. You understand this?
Yeah, where only a few thousand Orthodox Christians live. Now, the question which is relevant to our friends who are from a Protestant background is the following. If you have a Christian Commonwealth like America this time, not Byzantium, you have political debates trying to promote one Christian leader versus, say, a non-Christian leader. Among many Christian churches, there are debates. Whom should we support for the next elections? You pretty much, am I mistaken here, Petre? This is my first question, and we open it to you guys. You can interrupt me, and you can ask your questions yourself. So the question is, the kind of debates we're seeing right now in America, but not just in America, but also in Europe. debates related to the political function of Christianity on the one hand, do they resemble, in a sense, the kind of debates that we were witnessing in late Byzantium?
No, no, no.
Who should exercise power?
No, what is important maybe for today to understand today political phenomena in my book is the fact that I'm showing that a society destroys itself before it is destroyed from the outside. So no society can be dismantled by an exterior enemy as long as it has the ideological conviction. So the ideological basis, and I'm using here ideological in a neutral sense. So as long as it believes in itself. I am saying that Byzantium was not believing in itself anymore, already starting with the 13th century, but in the 14th century, an institution appeared to replace Byzantium on its territory, which was the Patriarchate of Constantinople. So the Patriarch started acting as the chief of a community which replaced the political community of the empire. And this new community survived the conquest of 1453, because the reality is that Christian communities survived the Ottoman conquest. And this allowed, in fact, after at the beginning of the 19th century, the Great Revival. So all these territories conquered, Eastern Europe was very important economically and demographically for the Ottoman Empire. So the eastern provinces of the Ottoman Empire were less populated than the Balkanic provinces. So the loss in the 19th century for the Ottoman Empire was huge, was tremendous, and brought finally the end of the empire after the First World War. But I want to say this following thing, that Christian society didn't disappear with 1453. Not only didn't disappear, it continued, and it was able to reconstruct itself as a society, as a unified society in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. And it was split, this unity, this Christian unity was split only by the national idea. The national idea which made the Greeks being the Greeks of ancient Athens. So it revived the ancient Greek
Hellenism.
ethnos. The Romanians started being Romans, descendant of the Romans. The Russians started being Slavs, and etc. The Bulgarians, a mixture of Slavs and Bulgars. So the transformation of all these societies, which had a unified culture and a unified spirituality, and even I would say a unified political ideal, which was to revive the empire. All these societies starting fighting each other, and it was the real end, as Yorga said, the real end of Byzantium, 1821, and the following crisis. So what happened was the end of a certain Orthodox idea, the one incorporated between 1453 and 1821. Now, so this is the basic lesson. A society ruins itself from the inside and changes its objectives from the inside. And then, of course, external events can bring the political end, which we see, which as historians. Now, for our world, if churches are going still, the ancient, the traditional historical churches are going to play a role, I doubt it. I doubt it, because they are not controlling anymore anything. think that each church has inside in each of these historical churches have contenders, contesters, parallel churches, old calendarists, old
Critics.
believers in Russia, etc. So they do not control the hearts of the people as it was in the 14th century, as it was still in the late 18th century and early 19th century. So something happened which brought this cultural unity, cultural idea of orthodoxy to an end. So what will follow, I am not a prophet to say, but for the moment, the actors which we have today, yes, they are playing in a very traditional way, and we are looking at this quarrel over Ukraine between Moscow and Constantinople, and many commentators also say now you have a patriarch in Moscow for the Russians and the patriarch Bartholomew is for the Americans. But this is an oversimplified and doesn't explain anything of what happens in Christian societies in Greece or in Romania or even in the United States. Imagine the patriarch wasn't able to unify orthodoxy in America, which was his project since long, to have one church for all the Orthodox, which would have been normal for the Orthodox in America. And instead, there is the Orthodox Church of America, which is not recognized by the Patriarch. So the Patriarch is far from controlling the Patriarch Bartholomew, I'm saying now.
What you're saying is that, yeah, 19th century nationalism is still controlling the discourse of local churches in America.
Yes, and but a second layer, more complicated than this, are those who contest their national authorities. Imagine in America you have two Romanian churches, the one in the Orthodox Church of America and the one which is the missionary
Vatra
of the Bucharest Patriarchate. And this happens for all the entities in the diaspora. So all over in the diaspora, you have this split between a pro-home church and an anti-home church. Even after the unification of the Zarubezhnaya Cerkev with the Moscow Patriarchate, a lot of communities refused to follow the bishops. So I think that we are oversimplifying here and making things. The patriarchs will not play anymore the role they played in history.
I want to ask my colleagues whether they want to comment or ask questions. Hello, Troy. Hello, Maria. Hello, Theodora. Welcome. So this is an interesting conversation about the end of times from a political point of view. Troy, please.
Yes, I would just say it's amazing to me when I hear this from a perspective outside the United States, because here we seem to have in our history, which isn't very long history, obviously, but our history is the foundation without the church being part of the government. Exactly. And we're discussing the act of withdrawing the church from the government over 200 years, but more than 800 years ago. And it's an amazing parallel because we're having the same discussion that perhaps they had in determining whether or not they had the representative of God actively controlling their government. And we're in a discussion. Many people believe we must have this, we must select the representative of God to be our leader of our government. And it's just a completely fantastic thought that this has been going on, the same has been happening by academics from 1,000. It's wonderful.
So if we couldn't hear the last comment, can you repeat the last comment? If I'm not mistaken, but Petre, yeah, go on. So what Troy said is that long before the advent of the American idea on the world history, many people thought of developing two separate trajectories for the political body, one trajectory, and that would be the government, and then for the spiritual body, the church.
Of course, since at the moment when the great project of blending empire and Christianity appeared with Constantine the Great, there were several people who were asking and contesting even the legitimacy of this process. For example, Donatus and his Donatist church were, for example, those who were saying Christians who relapsed, who renounced Christianity during the persecutions, cannot be reinstated, especially clerics, no, reinstated in their previous position. But basically, Donatus and his followers were saying there is nothing, so we cannot, this is the more radical idea, we cannot play now with the one who was our enemy a few years ago. This is indeed astonishing how quickly a group of important bishops adhered, which were themselves aristocrats, they were belonging to the elite, including our very dear Cappadocian fathers, no, Basil and Gregory of Nyssa and Gregory of Nazianz. So they were belonging to the so highest sphere of the social elite in the Roman Empire. And not to speak about Melania and the other rich people who created all the churches in Palestine, and all the places of pilgrimage we are seeing now are foundations of rich Romans in the 4th century. But not only, the monastic movement itself is a quiet critique of this blending of empire and Christianity. Why I am saying a quiet critique? Because you don't read it written like I am saying it here. But when all these monks were asked by the emperor to come to give their advice, to play a role, to say something about them, when they are refusing this dialogue, it is because they are not recognizing any spiritual relevance to the empire. So in Christianity, from the beginning, existed a nucleus of resistance to this blending, which from time to time props up in history, creates an event, creates a big movement, and you can discover this movement in Eastern Roman Empire in the first 1,000 years, because the Eastern Empire was the rich and important part of Christianity at that moment. But you can discover it also in Western Europe with figures like Thomas Becket, with then movements which started the pre-Reformation, or even in the Reformation, the first reformers, they wanted to reform, as you know better than me, to reform the Catholic Church. They didn't want to establish another church. And even all these new churches which appear, they always say, we are the church. We are not a new church, another church. We are the church, and the others are in error, in heresy, in schisma, etc. So coming back to your observation, indeed, America is the prototype now to the best historical phenomenon, the best historical image of a separation of church and state. Only the problem is, with the mind you can separate church and state, but the citizen is the same. I am a member of the church, I am a member of the state, I am a citizen and a Christian. So if state or society, the state, the political society clashes with the Christian society, then the clash is within people, and people finally they choose a part. I am with the church, I am with the state, and then of course the church starts being a political actor, starts representing another community in conflict with the former community. In another work than in this book, I was describing two types of community to which we are contributing and we are belonging to. You would say it's Augustine's
De Civitate Dei.
De Civitate Dei. But no, it's more precise, even from a Christian point of view. And this is in a way to defend Byzantium. From a Christian point of view, you can define a community of salvation and the community of survival. And you need to partake to both communities. The community of survival is this world. The fact that tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, you have to feed, to dress, in this world, and you need solidarity to do this. You need people working together to survive on this earth. Meanwhile, the community of salvation is the community which creates, and where solidarity is also needed, which creates the context for working your own salvation. But your own salvation is also a result of interaction with other people. You need to learn somewhere where and when and how to find Christ. You have to learn from others how to make when you fail in your faith, how to continue your life when you fail. These are very important questions of the communities of salvation. The existence of these two communities, and which are in a way battling for you, for your
commitment and loyalty.
Faith. Yes, they both communities ask you to be active in each of them, creates an unperishable tension. You cannot resolve this tension. You will never, by political or juridical means, resolve this tension. The only way is what, in fact, Christianity did in history, to make reactions milder, to appease violence, and to resolve conflicts by negotiation.
Petre, everything you say is very profound, very deep, and we are very grateful for this. We have only, I think, 5 minutes to go. We always must end on time. 9 p.m. is the last hour, so to speak. And we have Maria Țiganuș from Seattle asking you a question.
Thank you, Mihai. Thank you, Mr. Guran, for a wonderful presentation. We talked about history and empires, and I kind of want to bring our state of mind into the present and perhaps in the future, and talk about people. So with the people, how do you think people's relationship with God and just spirituality speaking was different, centuries ago, but let's not even go that far, maybe even decades ago compared to nowadays. And also we talked about America, United States, a society which has been very polarized lately, not as much as it was decades ago, but one thing I've noticed for sure is the society became very polarized. I feel like now more than ever, these things like extremes always amplify, like always get more potential. So what's your vision on how things should change for the future, or even for the time being, or like where the things are heading from a spirituality standpoint?
Yes. Are there other questions? I would answer all the questions in one.
Anybody else? Thank you, Maria. This is very good. Anybody else who wants to butt in for the last moment of our conversation, for the last segment? Okay. So Petre, please feel free to wrap it up.
Yes, Maria's question, thank you very much for your question, is a very, very deep and difficult question. Because what I can see, we are in a completely new situation. So for the first time in history, we are, and I'm not speaking here about projects, but about reality, we are a global society. We are the society of this earth. And those who are very sad that in Western Europe, Christianity disappears or declines and even disappears in several regions, should look at the regions where Christianity is a thriving religion, especially in societies which are not at all friendly and historically not friendly with Christianity.
Like sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes.
Like sub-Saharan Africa.
One of the places. And that's why I think in a way, the center of history will switch for once since several thousand years. History was created around the Mediterranean. And we are not only used, if you see the number of books written, of monuments, of everything, it is here that humanity, the core of humanity was around the Mediterranean. Now in the last few centuries, this center expanded to the Americas, first of all, but also to Africa and the southern part. But now for the first time, it seems that the center of the world switches to Asia. And this is because it is the last territory which was in a way untouched by Christianity. So I think the future of Christianity should play there, I'm saying now in a normative way. So from the point of view of the expectations that Christianity should be announced to all the edges of the world, until the edges of the world. It is the end of the gospel, of Matthew's gospel. No, Mihai help me.
The end of the world, yeah. It's also written at the end of the gospel, make disciples, okay? That's yes, why I want to draw attention to you, because you are also a teacher. You are also somebody who has established a private school, and you basically are into homeschooling in a big way. So we want to help you for the future, because we have our American friends who support all the way from Texas to Arizona and Florida, homeschooling in general. And we have a lawyer with us. He's also into that. And I want to present you not just as a scholar, as an academic with outstanding results. He Petre Guran has published, I forgot to say that, and I apologize at the beginning. He published with Oxford University Press, Oxford History of Historical Writing, Oxford Handbook of Late Antiquity, has published with many publishing houses. Again, you can read his publications in Dilemma Veche, but on top of that, he's a father of 4 very brilliant kids. He is married to a wonderful architect, and they have built a school not far away from Bucharest. I have been a visiting professor in the mud of Bunești school, and I'm really praying and hoping that one day we will join forces so that your young architects, those who go and study with you, and our young and not so young students of the Great Books Club will come together in order to discover truly the legacy of the Western civilization, which of course must be translated into Asian languages and be multiplied there too. So this was a wonderful feast. This was a true spiritual feast. And once again, we have proved to you, ladies and gentlemen, that Romania is a flourishing country in terms of intellectual prowess. We have brilliant intellects. We have brilliant people who should be heard outside the country. And of course, I must say this too, Mr. Petre Guran was good friends with the late Peter Brown, one of the greatest historians of late antiquity, Peter Brown. He's still alive, right?
He's still alive, yes. He's
Thank
not
you.
late.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about it.
Gilbert Dagron died.
With the aging Peter Brown, but with the late Gilbert Dagron, he was also very well known and very well respected when he did his PhD in Paris Sorbonne by great historians of Byzantium in the United Kingdom and also in France. I happen to have a mentor of mine in the person of Andrew Louth, who was also a great admirer of Petre Guran. So thank you for that. This was wonderful. Let me remind you, tomorrow we have another meeting. So Petre, we have a serious program here. Tomorrow we are going to read about the political community, and that is Clausewitz. Tomorrow we read about war, about strategy, particularly the chapters on strategy, because it's the beginning of the year. We need to have a strategic approach to our endeavors, and so we will read tomorrow the silver section of our club. We will read Clausewitz, and I think we meet again on Wednesday for the bronze lecture and for the bronze conversation. Thank you once again. This was wonderful, and we are in debt to you in a big way.
Thank you. And sorry, Mihai, just one more quick question. Can
Please.
you guys share the links to Mr. Guran's books?
Yes, so I will send you all the links and all the materials you will send me on the gold group on WhatsApp. You will receive everything from Petre Guran.
Thank you.
Is there a place where we can buy the book?
Yeah, I was looking to buy them.
Yes, in Bucharest, in the library of the history faculty of history, in the whole of the faculty of history.
So, yeah.
But I will give you the site and how to order the book. So
online? Can you do that online?
Online,
okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is a pearl. This is a gem, okay, of Byzantine historiography. Please order the book. Please read also his articles on Dilemma Veche site. Wonderful articles, and please stay in touch. See you tomorrow, guys. Thank you very much, and good night. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.